So, this is very unique as you directed the documentary Wildflower and now this drama. What was it about this true story where you kept going back to it and wanting to spotlight it in a different way?
It's interesting. I didn't really want to go back to it. It was a 6-year project, and I certainly didn't want to recreate the same thing. I guess ultimately it was this idea that I did feel like it was such a unique story, and if I could tell it in a way that was potentially a little more accessible through comedy, actually, mixed with heart, I thought that maybe we could reach more people, and so that was kind of ultimately the way that I decided, okay, yeah, I do want to continue and give it another 2 years of my life.
For sure. And how do you think doing the documentary helped you to tell this version better, maybe?
I don't know if it was better. I think it's just very different. And what it was for me was it was really an inspiration. The doc was really just truly an inspiration, and the narrative is its own thing completely. So I think that that's kind of how I really look at it. And it isn't like it's a retelling of the doc. It's sort of it's a very unique family dynamic, and then we used that as a launch off to kind of write the narrative.
For sure. And I like the narration in the movie. Can you speak to that framing device and having her accent as a mystery to get viewers initially invested?
Yeah, that was from the beginning, kind of when Jana Savage and I, the writer, screenwriter, we talked about kind of how we potentially, would make this a narrative, and that was always kind of part of it, is getting into her head, and this idea that my niece was in a coma, and so this idea of, and that's where sort of taking some creative license to kind of imagine what it must have been like, and we did a bunch of research in terms of people who have had comas and their ability to actually hear and not speak, which is a phenomenon, and so sort of that was something where we use that as a device, as you say, and then just kind of to almost imagine what it must have been like to kind of have this family, very opinionated family, kind of surrounding you while you're in prison, in the prison of a hospital bed.
It makes a lot of sense. And, Kiernan Shipka does such a great job. What qualities made you go, she's perfect for this role?
Kiernan from the beginning was always my first choice. And I think it was from Mad Men, and this, she had such poise and such wisdom and such kind of confidence at such a young age. And the real person that we based this character on has all of those qualities. So it was very important to me that, whoever we cast had that. And so when I met Kiernan, I knew within 2 seconds she was the one. There is just such a deep intelligence to her that I just found to be, perfect.
Awesome.
And
And
strength too. I think there's a real strength that comes through.
absolutely. You're also able to tell this coming of age story, and it deals with so many difficult topics, but there's a great sense of humor sprinkled in. How was it balancing those elements?
That was one of the hardest parts for me personally, is just the tone of this, and being terrified that I wasn't going to get it right, because it is. I felt like bouncing back and forth between comedy and drama. It was very important, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure we're not laughing at the wrong things. And I think this family truly loves to laugh, and so I just wanted to lean into that and bring that aspect to life. I think when the cameras stopped rolling in the documentary was when I saw a lot of laughter and joy. But I think for people who aren't used to having cameras on them, obviously I think it took the cameras turning off for me to kind of see some of that, and so I was able to kind of bring that out, I think, in the narrative.
Definitely. And, Alexandra Daddario gives such a caring performance as Joy. What stood out about working with her?
Um, Alexandra and I had just a really long conversation, and we talked about the character, and I believe she saw the documentary, and we just sort of had a really long conversation, and I thought that she really sort of possessed the empathy that Joy needed. And also there's a duality to that character where, I think there's this guilt that she had because she was kind of born quote unquote normal, or without a disability, not being neurodivergent. And I think there was this feeling that that I think you struggle with, and also this idea of being very protective of having a sibling, who is, neurodivergent. And so I think we talked about all those things, and how it's and how that would sort of be really part of your DNA if you were raised with a sibling who has, any sort of a disability.
Absolutely. And, what was the most difficult aspect to adapt for turning this true story into a drama and giving it a more traditional movie structure?
That's an interesting question. I think that because it was, again, in this inspiration, we took some of the characters and then put a lot of our own kind of stuff onto them, and I guess there wasn't anything that was that difficult. I think playing around with this idea of starting the movie with somebody in a coma who's our star of the movie, and for 20 pages or something. I'm thinking the original draft she was in the coma for 30 or something like that. That was super challenging, because I know, we all felt like we have to get to Kiernan, sort of Kiernan older, not, I thought Ryan Armstrong, who played young B, was amazing. But at the end of the day, this is Kiernan's movie. And so I think that was something that in the edit, I was, I struggled with, because I really wanted to get to kind of get Kiernan out of that bed, so that was the tricky part. It's like, I knew we didn't want to be stuck in the hospital room for too long.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the love we see between B's parents is really sweet. Can you speak to telling that story well and showing so many sides of them?
Yeah, that was something too that I just witnessed, in the documentary, in terms of this, just a very deep love that isn't non-traditional love in many ways. And so it was very important to me to sort of capture that, and the spirit of these two people who really just wanted to again be kind of quote unquote normal. And that means live on their own in their own house, have a family, work and provide for themselves. And so I think that was something that I really wanted to kind of show in an authentic way as possible.
For sure. And your daughter wrote 2 songs for the movie. What was that collaboration like?
Oh yeah, she well, so she watched the movie, and that was a product of like, okay, we sort of, it was a very limited budget, and so my daughter Penelope is I'm obviously very biased, but I think she's very talented, and she watched the movie and wrote the song based on a rough cut of the movie, which actually both songs, one of them was with her friend Lola Francis, and they go by Francis and Simone, and then Penelope wrote the song kind of in the middle of the movie on her own. But yeah, it was really great. I mean, she watched it, and I didn't give her any direction whatsoever other than here's a rough cut, and if it inspires you, maybe you can write something, and she did, and I thought she did a great job.
Awesome. And you have such a great cast, and there's a great focus on the extended family and what they think is best for B. How was balancing all these elements and characters while still keeping B at the center?
Yeah, it was tricky because, it's so much so that I started falling in love with some of these other characters. Like Brad Garrett was just amazing. And Jan and I ended up writing a scene, literally sort of, we would wrap, and then, I went to Jan, I was like, Brad's so good, we got to write another scene with Brad and Gene, and which we did. We did 2, and one ended up making it into film, and one we ended up having to cut. It's a tremendous scene, but it's interesting you say that, because it ended up sort of diverting us a little bit from B. And I had it in the movie at one point, and I think ultimately just felt like this really is B's story, and I got to keep it that way. and it's about B sort of finding her way with her extended family, as opposed to I could do a movie on each one of the extended family members and their reaction to this, I think would be actually quite interesting.
For sure. And speaking of Brad Garrett, what impressed you most about working with him? He did so well.
Oh man, I mean, he came in, he had, I think I only had Brad for, I want to say 2 days. It was like I barely had him, and he just came in and brought his A game. And I was obviously very used to him as a comedian, and I thought that his dramatic work was just incredible. And him, him and Gene together were just it was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I loved it. It was one of those things where it's like I just had to stand back and not get in their way.
For sure. And my last question is, you also have a background in commercials. How has that helped your feature work?
I think it really helped me because I had thousands of hours of time on set. So I think just kind of the knowledge of how, technically to put this together, I at least had that kind of behind me. And I had worked, and just working with actors for so many 15 plus years, it really helped me, and having a sort of a very strong point of view of how I wanted to execute.